My name is Emma Lawson, and I'm 38 years old, living in a charming townhouse nestled in one of Portland's leafy neighborhoods. To anyone who visits, my life looks like a carefully composed painting, a warm, inviting home filled with art and light, shared with my husband, David, who is a respected architect known for his innovative designs and thoughtful approach to his work. We've built a life together that many would envy, or so it seems. I work as a graphic designer, a career that has always allowed me to express my creativity and bring ideas to life in visual form. It's a profession I love, though it often demands long hours and tight deadlines. David, on the other hand, has carved out a reputation for being attentive and loving, the kind of husband who remembers the little things, my favorite coffee blend, the shows I never miss, the way I like our living room arranged on Sundays. When we first met, that attentiveness was one of the things that drew me to him. He had this quiet confidence, a steady presence that made me feel safe in a world that often felt unpredictable. Our early years together were full of passion and trust. We shared dreams of building a family, traveling the world, and creating a home that reflected both of us. I remember those days vividly, the thrill of new love, the endless conversations late into the night, the way our laughter filled the rooms of our first apartment. Back then, everything seemed possible. David was not only my partner but my best friend, someone I believed would stand beside me through whatever life threw our way. We moved into this townhouse about 5 years ago, a place that felt like ours from the moment we stepped through the door. It's a cozy space with just enough room for our tastes, a mix of modern and vintage, with plenty of natural light and a small garden out back where I grow herbs and flowers. It's the kind of home where you can feel grounded and inspired at the same time. David's architectural eye influenced many of the design choices, but it's also a reflection of my own aesthetic sensibilities. Together, we made it a sanctuary. In social circles, David is often described as the ideal husband, charming, successful, and deeply committed to his family. I've heard friends and colleagues say how lucky I am, how rare it is to find someone so devoted. I've always believed those words because from the outside, that's exactly what our marriage appeared to be. We hosted dinner parties, attended gallery openings, and spent weekends hiking in the nearby forests. Our photos show smiling faces, arms wrapped around each other, moments frozen in happiness. But beneath that polished exterior, there are complexities that only we know. Despite the busy rhythms of our lives, my deadlines, his projects, we managed to carve out time for each other. David would often surprise me with tickets to a concert or plan a weekend getaway on short notice. He was attentive in ways that felt genuine, never forced. I trusted him implicitly, and I put my heart into nurturing our bond. I believed that our love was a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Our conversations were always open and honest, or so I thought. We spoke about our goals, our fears, and the small details of our days. David was someone I could turn to after a hard day, someone who listened without judgment. I cherished that connection because it was rare and precious. When work demanded long hours, I reminded myself that his dedication was part of building the life we dreamed of. Looking back, the early years were a whirlwind of excitement and discovery. We celebrated milestones with joy, anniversaries marked with thoughtful gifts, promotions that brought new opportunities, and quiet evenings spent reading side by side. We talked about starting a family, though we agreed to wait until we both felt ready. Those conversations were filled with hope and anticipation. David's work as an architect often involved late nights and weekend commitments, but he always made sure to check in, to ask about my day, to share a meal when he could. I admired his passion for his craft, and I knew how much it meant to him to see a project through from concept to completion. He had a way of speaking about his designs that made me feel as if I were part of the process, even though I didn't fully understand the technical details. Our shared dreams extended beyond career accomplishments. We imagined traveling to Europe, exploring art museums in Paris, wandering through the streets of Rome, and tasting the local flavors of each city. We fantasized about a future filled with laughter and discovery, a life where our partnership grew deeper with each passing year. And yet, beneath all these beautiful moments, there was a quiet undercurrent I didn't fully recognize at the time. The subtle shifts in our daily interactions, the occasional distracted look in David's eyes, the way his phone seemed to buzz more often during dinner. I brushed these thoughts aside, telling myself that the demands of his work were simply taking their toll. After all, who could blame someone for being busy when their career was so demanding? I often found myself reflecting on how fortunate I was to have found someone like David. In a world where relationships often faltered under pressure, ours seemed resilient. I clung to that belief, even as the days grew busier and our routines more mechanical. The foundation of trust we had built felt unshakable, a shield against the uncertainties life might bring. Our townhouse, with its sun-dappled rooms and cozy corners, became a symbol of our shared life. It was a place where memories were made, quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers, evenings spent cooking meals together, the way our dog would curl up at our feet during a movie. These moments grounded me, reminding me of what we had created. I often thought about how our relationship had evolved from the early days of infatuation into something deeper, more complex. Love, I realized, wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect harmony, it was about the small, everyday acts of care and understanding. It was about choosing each other, again and again, even when the world outside felt overwhelming. For now, I held on to those feelings, trusting that the life we had built would continue to grow. I believed that the passion and trust we had nurtured would carry us forward, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And so, as I moved through each day in our townhouse, designing, creating, loving, I remained hopeful, unaware that the cracks beneath the surface were quietly beginning to form. As the months passed, the warmth and certainty I once felt began to wane, replaced by a quiet, gnawing loneliness that I found difficult to name. At first, I told myself it was simply the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship, that moments of distance were inevitable when both partners were juggling demanding careers and busy lives. But the feeling lingered, growing heavier with each passing day, until it became impossible to ignore. David's schedule had always been full, but recently his business trips became more frequent and extended. What used to be the occasional overnight stay now stretched into several days away, sometimes back-to-back. I understood that his work was important, that deadlines and client meetings often dictated his time. Yet, the absence left a hollow space in the rhythm of our life together. The evenings we once spent sharing meals and stories were now often spent alone, the silence in the house amplifying my sense of isolation. I tried to reach out, to bridge the growing gap between us. I would ask how his trips went, what he was working on, and if he needed anything. At first, David responded with his usual warmth, offering reassurances that everything was fine, that the busy period would pass soon. But gradually, those responses became shorter, less engaged. I caught glimpses of distraction in his eyes, the way he would glance at his phone during our conversations or seem preoccupied with something beyond the room. There were moments when I felt the distance keenly, like when I would prepare his favorite dinner only to eat alone, or when I'd look for him on Sunday mornings and find the bed empty because he had left early for a site visit. I found myself longing for the easy companionship we once shared, the effortless connection that made our house feel like home. Instead, I was met with silence, or polite but curt exchanges that left me feeling more like a roommate than a wife. Despite my growing unease, I hesitated to voice my feelings fully. I worried that expressing my loneliness would seem petty or burdensome, especially knowing how demanding David's work was. I told myself that his absences were temporary, that he was doing this for us, for our future. But every reassurance I received felt increasingly hollow, as if I were trying to convince not only him but myself that all was well. There were times I caught myself replaying conversations in my mind, searching for clues or missed signals. I noticed how David's attention seemed to shift in subtle ways, a hesitation before answering questions about his trips, a reluctance to share details about meetings or clients. When I pressed gently, he would smile and say everything was fine, that there was nothing to worry about. Yet, the nagging doubt continued to grow. Our routine, once filled with shared rituals and mutual care, began to unravel. The small acts of kindness that had once punctuated our days became rare. David stopped leaving me little notes or sending texts during the day. He no longer asked about my work or how I was feeling. Even our weekend plans became sparse, replaced by vague commitments or last-minute cancellations. I remember one evening in particular when the change felt most stark. We had planned a quiet dinner at home after a weekend filled with his out-of-town meetings. I had cooked his favorite meal, set the table with care, and lit candles to create a warm atmosphere. When David arrived, he seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly and barely making eye contact. We ate in near silence, his mind clearly elsewhere. He finally excused himself early, apologizing for an urgent call. I sat alone at the table, the flickering candlelight casting shadows that mirrored the growing distance between us. In the quiet that followed, I found myself questioning everything. Was this the new normal? Had the man I loved and trusted been replaced by someone I barely recognized? The loneliness settled deep within me, an ache that no amount of work or distraction could soothe. I tried to communicate my feelings, but each attempt was met with reassurances that felt more like deflections. "I'm just stressed with work," David would say. "It's nothing personal." Yet, the reassurances didn't reach the part of me that longed for connection. I sensed that beneath the surface, something was shifting, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. At times, I found myself watching David closely, searching for answers in his expressions, gestures, and tone. There were moments when he seemed distant, almost absent, as if his mind was elsewhere even when he was physically present. I wondered if he was hiding something, but the thought terrified me. I didn't want to believe that the foundation of our marriage could be cracked. The more I tried to understand, the more isolated I felt. My own doubts and insecurities crept in, making me question my perceptions. Was I imagining things? Was my loneliness a symptom of my own fears rather than reality? These questions haunted me late into the night, when the house was silent and my mind raced with unanswered questions. I confided in a few close friends, hoping for perspective or reassurance. Their responses were kind but varied. Some suggested that long-term relationships naturally go through phases, others urged me to trust my instincts and pay attention to the signs. Their words comforted me momentarily but also underscored the complexity of what I was facing. Despite the growing tension, I still held on to hope. I believed that if I could just talk to David openly, share my feelings without blame or accusation, we could find our way back to each other. I imagined a conversation where we would lay everything on the table, rebuild the trust and closeness that seemed to be slipping away. But the more I tried to create those moments, the more elusive they became. David's distracted demeanor and the increasing frequency of his business trips became barriers I couldn't overcome. The man who once listened with warmth now seemed guarded, his reassurances hollow echoes in a growing silence. As the weeks passed, the cracks in our relationship deepened. I felt like I was losing him, piece by piece, and there was little I could do to stop it. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now echoed with my loneliness, and I began to wonder if the life we had built was unraveling before my eyes. In the quiet moments alone, I wrestled with a mixture of emotions, sadness, confusion, and a creeping sense of unease that I couldn't shake. I tried to hold on to the memories of better times, to the love that had once been so tangible. But each day brought new challenges, new silences, and a growing distance that threatened to consume us both. Despite everything, I continued to hope that the man I married was still there beneath the surface. That somehow, we could find our way back to the connection and trust that had defined us. But with each passing day, that hope felt more fragile, and the loneliness more real. The unease that had settled over me deepened in subtle, unsettling ways I struggled to articulate. It started with small things that I might have dismissed if I hadn't noticed them stacking up, one after another, like a quiet warning I was too afraid to face. One evening, as I was balancing the bills on our kitchen counter, I spotted a receipt that didn't belong, an unfamiliar restaurant far from the city, dated on a night when David had said he was working late at his office. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself it was a mistake or perhaps a reimbursement for a client dinner. But when I found more receipts like this, an expensive boutique store, a hotel minibar charge, I couldn't ignore the growing pattern. Our joint credit card statements began to feel like a mystery I was desperate to solve. Charges appeared for places I didn't recognize, at times when David was supposedly traveling for work, but none of it aligned with the itineraries he shared. It was as if he were living a parallel life that I wasn't privy to. The trust I'd once taken for granted began to erode, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that I didn't want but couldn't escape. Adding to my unease was David's increasing secrecy around his phone and computer. He used to be open about his devices, leaving his phone on the kitchen counter or sharing funny messages he received. Now, he guarded them like secrets, often stepping away when a call came in or turning the screen away if I happened to glance over his shoulder. I noticed how he would quickly close tabs on his laptop when I entered the room or mute notifications with a furtive glance. The shift felt like a wall rising between us, thick and impenetrable. I tried to remind myself that privacy was normal, that everyone deserved some boundaries, especially with work. But the instinct telling me something was wrong grew louder. The man who once welcomed me into his world was now shutting me out, piece by piece. I found myself watching him more closely, searching for clues in his tone, his expressions, even the way he moved through the house. There were inconsistencies that made my heart race. On one occasion, David told me he was meeting a client for lunch downtown, yet I later discovered a message on his phone to someone named Elle. The message was brief, casual, and filled with a warmth I hadn't heard in his voice for weeks. When I asked about it, he dismissed it as a colleague from a past project. But the disconnect between his explanation and what I saw planted seeds of doubt I couldn't ignore. At night, when the house was quiet and I lay awake, my mind replayed fragments of conversations and moments that now felt suspicious. I remembered how David sometimes seemed distracted during our talks, his eyes drifting to his phone or out the window, as if his mind was elsewhere. I questioned whether I had been naive to overlook these signs, or if I was unfairly reading too much into things. The uncertainty was as painful as the fear. Isolation crept in with each passing day. I stopped confiding in David the way I once did, afraid of the guarded responses or the growing distance in his gaze. Instead, I withdrew into myself, wrestling with feelings I couldn't fully name. Was I imagining betrayal, or was my intuition trying to warn me? The lines blurred between reality and fear, leaving me trapped in a fog of doubt. I found myself second-guessing my own perceptions, wondering if stress and loneliness were clouding my judgment. I asked close friends for advice, but even their reassurances felt like a fragile balm over a deeper wound. "Trust your gut," one said. "Sometimes, things aren't what they seem," another offered. Their words echoed in my mind, mixing with my own swirling thoughts. There were moments when I confronted David gently, hoping to bridge the growing gap. I asked about the receipts, his late nights, the strange messages. Each time, he reassured me with a calmness that felt both soothing and evasive. "It's all work stuff," he said. "Nothing to worry about." But his answers didn't align with the evidence accumulating before me. The more he denied, the more the distance between us widened. Even the routines we once shared began to feel hollow. The dinners I prepared were met with distracted thanks, the weekend plans cancelled or postponed without explanation. The affectionate touches that had once been effortless became scarce and tentative. I felt like a stranger in my own home, watching the man I loved slip further away. One afternoon, while tidying up his office space, I stumbled upon a folder that wasn't there before, marked with his initials but otherwise unremarkable. Curiosity urged me to glance inside when I knew he wasn't around. Inside were documents and notes that hinted at projects I had never heard about, locations and dates that didn't match any trips he had told me about. A sinking feeling settled in my chest as I realized how much I didn't know. I began to understand that the cracks in our marriage were more than just emotional distance. There were secrets carefully hidden beneath the surface. The man who had once been an open book was now a locked door. I felt adrift, caught between love and suspicion, yearning for truth but fearing what I might find. In the quiet moments alone, I tried to piece together what I knew, what I suspected, and what I hoped would be nothing more than misunderstandings. But the inconsistencies piled up like a puzzle missing its final piece. Each new discovery chipped away at the foundation of trust one had built around us. I started keeping notes, small observations jotted down in a notebook I carried with me. Dates, times, odd phrases, unexplained absences. It was a private record of my unraveling reality, a way to make sense of the growing chaos. Writing it down gave me a fragile sense of control, as if documenting the truth might somehow anchor me amid the storm. Yet, every time I looked at that notebook, my heart pounded with fear. What if I was wrong? What if my doubts were destroying the very relationship I wanted to save? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe, hard to think clearly. Despite everything, a part of me still clung to hope that David would explain, that the strange charges and secretive behavior had innocent explanations. I wanted to believe in the man I had married, the partner who once shared his world openly with me. But the silence that followed my questions, the evasive glances, and the growing distance told a different story. I found myself at a crossroads, caught between confronting the truth and preserving the fragile peace that remained. Each day brought new questions, new doubts, and a growing awareness that the life I thought I knew was shifting beneath my feet. The man I loved was there, but not in the way I had imagined. And I didn't know if I was ready to face what lay beyond the surface. While tidying David's study one quiet afternoon, I stumbled upon something that stopped me cold, a sealed, unmarked letter tucked carefully inside one of his design portfolios. The folder was slightly heavier than usual, and when I pulled it out, the envelope slipped to the floor. It was plain, cream-colored, with no return address or name, just my husband's handwriting on the front. I stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it from the other room, even though he wasn't home. Curiosity mingled with a rising sense of dread. I debated leaving it alone, telling myself I had no right to invade his privacy, but the letter called to me like a silent whisper I couldn't resist. When I was certain he wouldn't be back for hours, I broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the paper inside. What I read stopped my breath. The letter was intimate, raw, and chillingly detailed. It wasn't just a note or a casual message, it was a confession of sorts, written by another woman. She spoke about moments they had shared in secret, stolen dinners, whispered promises, and plans to meet again despite the risks. The words were filled with affection and longing but also with a sense of secrecy and guilt. I could almost hear her voice behind the ink, trembling with emotion. Each line felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The letter revealed details about David's life, names, places, dates, that were carefully concealed from me. It mentioned trips I hadn't been told about, conversations I wasn't a part of, and a connection I had never imagined existed. The betrayal was more than just infidelity, it was the shattering of the trust and honesty I thought defined our marriage. I sat down heavily, the letter slipping from my hands onto the floor. My mind raced, trying to process the flood of emotions crashing over me, shock, anger, heartbreak, disbelief. How long had this been going on? How could David keep this from me? I felt like the ground beneath me had given way, leaving me suspended in a void I couldn't escape. As I reread the letter, the reality became impossible to deny. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a fleeting mistake, it was a relationship that had been hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of our lives without my knowledge. The places she described were the same as some of the unexplained charges I had found on our credit card. The dates matched the nights he said he was working late or traveling for business. I thought about the late dinners, the secretive phone calls, the evasive answers. It all fit together now, like pieces of a puzzle I'd been trying desperately to solve. The man I thought I knew, the devoted husband, the attentive partner, had been living a double life, and I was the last to know. The letter also contained a plea, a hope that their connection could continue despite the risks. It was clear that this other woman cared deeply for David, just as I had once. The realization crushed me. I wondered if David's heart had shifted, if the promises we made were already broken. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, the letter clutched loosely in my hands. I thought about confronting David, about demanding answers and explanations. But fear held me back. What if he denied everything? What if I was wrong? The thought of losing him, of unraveling the life we built, was terrifying. Yet, the letter was undeniable proof of a betrayal I could no longer ignore. It shattered the illusion of our perfect marriage and forced me to face a painful truth. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. When David finally came home that evening, I was waiting for him, the letter folded carefully in my pocket. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand the truth, but instead, I found myself trembling with uncertainty. The man who walked through the door was the same one I had loved, yet now he was also the stranger I was trying to understand. I watched him closely as he moved through the house, noticing the familiar gestures, the way he hung his coat, the tired smile, but also the new distance in his eyes. I wondered what he would say if I gave him the letter, how he would explain the words written by another woman. When I finally spoke, my voice barely above a whisper, I asked about the letter. David's face changed in an instant, a flicker of surprise, then something I couldn't quite read. He hesitated, then said it was a misunderstanding, an old correspondence from a project years ago, nothing to worry about. But the defensiveness in his tone only deepened my doubts. I pressed him gently, seeking the truth behind the carefully chosen words. He deflected, refusing to meet my gaze, and the silence that followed was heavier than any argument. I realized then that this confrontation was only the beginning of a long and painful journey. That night, I lay awake, the letter's words echoing in my mind. The betrayal was no longer a shadow lurking in the corners, it was real, tangible, and devastating. The man I thought I married was not the one I was living with. And I was left to navigate the uncertain path ahead, clutching the letter that revealed a secret I never wanted to know. I confronted David the very next evening, the letter folded tightly in my trembling hands, a weight heavier than I could have imagined pressing down on my chest. I needed answers, truths that could no longer be hidden behind evasions and shadows. When I sat him down in the living room, the air between us thick with tension, I laid the letter on the coffee table, watching as his eyes flickered to it, then away, avoiding mine. David, I began, trying to steady my voice though it cracked beneath the strain, I found this. I need to know what it means. For a moment, he said nothing. His face was a mask of calm, but I saw the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of something unspoken behind his eyes. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured. Emma, I don't know where you got this, but it's not what you think. Not what I think. I echoed, disbelief and hurt rising like a tide. It's a letter from another woman, David. It talks about things you've never mentioned to me, nights you weren't home, dinners I wasn't invited to. How can you say it's not what I think? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I hadn't seen from him in years. It's an old letter. From years ago, before we were married. I never meant for it to come up again. I thought I'd dealt with it. His words felt like a shield, a defense built to protect a truth he wasn't ready to admit. But the letter's details were too fresh, too specific to be from the distant past he claimed. My heart raced, desperate for clarity. Why hide it? Why keep it a secret all this time? David's eyes finally met mine, clouded with something I couldn't decipher, guilt, fear, regret. Because I knew it would hurt you. I didn't want to lose you. I've changed, Emma. I'm here now. But his reassurances felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. I wanted to believe him, to hold on to the man I loved, but the walls he built around the truth were suffocating. How long has this been going on, David? How many times have you lied to me? He looked away, silence hanging between us like a fragile thread. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I made mistakes, Emma. I'm sorry. His apology was a fragile offering, but it wasn't enough to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. I felt betrayed, not just by the letter, but by the years of deception it represented. The man who once shared his world openly now guarded it behind walls of denial. The conversation spiraled into difficult questions and guarded answers. I pressed him for details, names, dates, reasons, but he remained elusive, unwilling to fully unravel the tangled web he had woven. Each answer seemed to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. I sensed his defensiveness growing, a barrier rising with every question I asked. It was as if acknowledging the truth would shatter something inside him that he wasn't prepared to face. And in that moment, I realized how much I didn't know about the man I thought I had married. The denial wasn't just words, it was a shield against the pain that honesty would bring. I wanted to break through it, to find the man beneath the facade, but he seemed to retreat further with every attempt. The distance between us, once subtle, now felt vast and unbridgeable. After hours of trying to reach him, I felt exhausted and hollow. The letter had opened a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through, and David's evasions left me standing in the dark, searching for a glimmer of light. I wondered how long this had been going on, what else he might be hiding, and who else might know the truth. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our home shifted. Conversations became strained, silences heavier. I caught glimpses of a man torn between his past and present, unable or unwilling to confront the consequences. I felt trapped between love and suspicion, desperate for answers but fearful of what they might reveal. I sought solace in friends, sharing fragments of my pain, but found little comfort. Their sympathy was tempered by caution, urging me to tread carefully, to protect myself. I realized that the path ahead was mine to walk alone, navigating the fragile terrain of betrayal and trust. At night, I lay awake, replaying our confrontation, the words spoken and unspoken. The letter lingered in my mind, a symbol of the fracture in our marriage. I questioned everything I thought I knew about David, about us. The man who had once been my partner now seemed a stranger, his true self obscured by layers of denial. Despite the pain, I still yearned for the truth, for clarity that might guide my next steps. But each attempt to find it seemed to push him further away, deepening the silence between us. I wondered if our marriage could survive the weight of these secrets, or if the cracks were already too wide to mend. In the quiet moments alone, I wrestled with a storm of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, and a lingering hope that somehow, we could find our way back. But the road ahead was uncertain, shadowed by doubt and guarded by silence. I realized that confronting David was just the beginning of a longer journey, one that would test the limits of our love and the strength of my own resolve. The letter had shattered the illusion of our perfect marriage, leaving me to pick up the pieces and decide what kind of future I wanted to build, if any at all. After the confrontation with David left me stranded in a sea of uncertainty, I realized I couldn't simply wait for answers that might never come. I needed to piece together the fragments of truth on my own, to understand the extent of the betrayal lurking just out of sight. Quietly, almost cautiously, I began retracing David's recent trips and communications, determined to uncover what he had hidden beneath layers of half-truths and omissions. I started with his calendar, the digital one he used for work appointments and personal reminders. What I found was a maze of vague entries: client meeting, site visit, lunch with C, notes that seemed deliberately nondescript. Yet, when I compared these to the receipts and messages I had discovered before, patterns emerged. Some dates aligned with charges at restaurants and hotels I hadn't been told about, and names cropped up that David had never mentioned in conversation. Digging deeper, I sifted through emails and message threads on his computer, careful to avoid crossing boundaries but driven by a need for clarity. Among the countless work-related exchanges, I found private conversations with a woman whose name was never fully spelled out, only initials and nicknames. Their tone was casual but intimate, filled with inside jokes and plans that suggested more than a professional relationship. The messages hinted at meetings in places David had told me were strictly business. I saw references to dinners, late-night texts, and weekend getaways, all under the guise of work commitments. The realization hit me hard: the affair had been hidden in plain sight, woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. What stung most was how ordinary it all seemed. The betrayal wasn't marked by dramatic confrontations or glaring mistakes but by subtle lies and omissions that, taken together, painted a clear picture of deceit. The small inconsistencies I had noticed, the unexplained receipts, the secretive phone calls, the vague calendar notes, were pieces of a puzzle I had been piecing together without realizing it. The betrayal was closer than I had ever imagined, not lurking in some distant past but embedded in the present we shared. It was in the bills I paid, the quiet evenings when David was working late, and the whispered conversations I overheard when I wasn't supposed to be listening. As I connected the dots, a painful clarity settled over me. The man I had trusted to be my partner, my confidant, had been living a double life right under my nose. The affair wasn't a secret hidden in shadows but a reality carefully concealed in everyday moments. I found myself questioning everything: how long it had been going on, what else I didn't know, and whether there had been a point when the choice to deceive had been made consciously. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and profoundly alone. Yet, amidst the pain, I also gained a strange sense of empowerment. Uncovering the truth, no matter how painful, was a step toward reclaiming control over a life that had felt increasingly out of reach. Each piece of evidence was a small victory, a way to make sense of the chaos and begin to chart a path forward. I documented everything carefully, creating a timeline of events that mapped the lies and the hidden moments. It was exhausting work, both mentally and emotionally, but necessary. The notebook I carried with me now held more than observations, it held the truth I needed to face. As the picture became clearer, I realized that the betrayal was not just a moment in time but a sustained pattern. The affair had been woven into the fabric of our daily lives, camouflaged by routine and routine's comforting familiarity. It was this realization that brought the most profound sense of loss, not just for the man I thought I knew, but for the life we had built together. I wrestled with the knowledge that this deception had been so close, so intertwined with our shared existence, that it was impossible to separate the two. The trust one had placed in David felt shattered, replaced by a cautious skepticism that made every interaction fraught with uncertainty. Despite the pain, I found myself searching for reasons, a need to understand why, to make sense of the choices that had led us here. I thought about David's pressures at work, his personality, and the moments when I sensed his withdrawal. None of these explained the betrayal, but they painted a picture of a man struggling with his own demons, perhaps as lost as I was. I tried to imagine the conversations we might have had the truth been spoken sooner. Would things have been different? Could we have found a way to heal? These questions haunted me, their answers elusive. In the silence of our home, I grappled with the enormity of what I had uncovered. The affair was no longer a shadowy suspicion but a documented reality. The man I loved had been living a life parallel to ours, with secrets carefully kept and truths hidden behind a veneer of normalcy. Yet, even as I faced this painful truth, I knew I couldn't allow it to define me. The journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with uncertainty and heartbreak, but I was determined to find my way through it. The discovery had broken something open inside me, a mixture of grief and resolve that would shape the decisions I had yet to make. I realized that healing would require honesty, both with David and with myself. It would mean confronting the pain, asking hard questions, and ultimately deciding what I was willing to accept. The path was unclear, but the first step was taken. I had uncovered the truth, no longer willing to live in the shadows of deception. As I closed the notebook and looked around our home, I felt a fragile flicker of strength. The life I had known was forever changed, but within that change lay the possibility of renewal. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face the truth, to reclaim my voice, and to begin rebuilding from the fragments left behind. The days following my discovery were a whirlwind of emotions, anger, heartbreak, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal that seemed to seep into every corner of my being. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of a precipice, staring down into a chasm of uncertainty that stretched far beyond anything I had ever imagined. The life I thought I had was unraveling, and with it, my sense of self. I found myself wrestling with a storm of conflicting feelings. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make David understand the depth of the pain he had caused. Another part of me craved escape, from the hurt, from the memories, from the weight of the truth. But beneath it all was a quiet, persistent determination, to reclaim control over my life and my future, no matter how difficult that path might be. In the midst of this turmoil, I reached out to friends I trusted, those who had stood by me through life's ups and downs. Their support was a lifeline, offering a safe space to vent, to cry, and to make sense of the chaos inside me. They listened without judgment, reminding me that my feelings were valid and that I was not alone. One friend, in particular, became my anchor, Sarah, a counselor who had helped me in the past through difficult transitions. I decided to seek her guidance again, knowing I needed professional support to navigate the maze of emotions and decisions ahead. With Sarah's help, I began to unpack the layers of my pain. Through our conversations, I learned to separate my feelings of anger from the core of my self-worth. I realized that while David's betrayal had shaken my trust, it did not define me. I was more than the wife who had been deceived. I was a woman capable of resilience, strength, and renewal. The letter, once a symbol of betrayal and heartbreak, gradually transformed into a catalyst for clarity. It forced me to confront truths I had long avoided and to see the reality of my marriage without the rose-colored lens I had worn for so long. It became a mirror reflecting not just the fracture in our relationship but also my own needs and boundaries. I spent many sleepless nights pondering the future, what it might hold, what I wanted it to hold. The decision loomed large and daunting. Could I forgive and rebuild, or was it time to let go and protect myself? I weighed the memories of love and laughter against the shadows of deceit, searching for a path that honored both my heart and my dignity. In these moments of reflection, I recognized the importance of self-respect. I understood that staying in a relationship without trust would erode my sense of worth and happiness. The choice to end the marriage, while painful, was also an act of courage, a declaration that I deserved honesty, respect, and love that was whole and true. Still, the decision was not made lightly. It meant dismantling the life we had built together, facing the uncertainty of change, and stepping into the unknown. It meant grappling with loss, not only of David but of the future I had imagined for us. The grief was real and raw, a testament to the depth of my love and the pain of its betrayal. I began to prepare myself for the difficult conversations and practical steps that lay ahead. I sought legal advice to understand my rights and protections, ensuring that I could safeguard my well-being and financial security. I reached out to close friends for emotional support, knowing that I would need their strength in the days to come. Throughout this process, I also focused on healing. I rekindled my passion for my work, immersing myself in creative projects that allowed me to express and process my emotions. I reconnected with friends and family, rebuilding a network of support that reminded me I was not defined by my marriage but by the relationships I nurtured and the person I was becoming. In time, I joined a support group for those recovering from infidelity, finding solace in the shared stories and experiences of others who had walked similar paths. Their courage inspired me, and their understanding offered a balm for the wounds I carried. Together, we navigated the complexities of trust, betrayal, and rebuilding, reminding each other that healing was possible. As I moved through this journey, I came to see the letter not just as a symbol of betrayal but as a turning point, a painful but necessary catalyst for change. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths and make choices that honored my worth and my future. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and heartache, but also filled with the possibility of rediscovery and growth. I was learning to listen to my own voice, to trust my instincts, and to set boundaries that protected my heart. In reclaiming my power, I was not erasing the past but rather transforming it into a foundation for a new beginning. The pain I endured was real, but so was my capacity for resilience. I realized that while I could not control David's actions or the past we shared, I could choose how to move forward, with strength, grace, and hope. This chapter of my life was closing, and a new one awaited, one where I would prioritize my well-being, embrace my independence, and seek happiness on my own terms. The decision to end the marriage was not just an ending but a courageous step toward reclaiming my life and writing a future defined by honesty, respect, and self-love. After making the difficult decision to end my marriage, I knew I needed to create new foundations for myself, both physically and emotionally. The townhouse that had once been a symbol of our shared life suddenly felt suffocating, filled with memories I wasn't ready to face each day. So, I found a small apartment not far from the city center, a space that was mine alone. It was modest but bright, with large windows that let in the morning sun and a quiet street lined with old maple trees. Moving there felt like the first step toward reclaiming my independence, a fresh canvas on which I could begin to paint my own life. The first weeks were a blur of unpacking, organizing, and adjusting to a new routine. I filled the apartment with things that brought me comfort, a soft throw blanket, a collection of plants, colorful artwork I'd been saving for years. I set up my workspace by the window, where I could watch the world go by as I worked on my graphic design projects. Slowly, the apartment started to feel less like an empty shell and more like a home, a refuge where I could breathe and heal. Work became both a distraction and a source of renewal. I threw myself into creative projects, channeling the complex emotions swirling inside me into designs and illustrations that reflected my journey. Each deadline met, each new concept brought to life, was a small victory, a reminder that I still had purpose and passion. My clients noticed a new depth and intensity in my work, and I was proud of the progress I was making, both professionally and personally. Reconnecting with friends was another vital part of rebuilding my life. Some had been distant during the hardest times, unsure how to approach my pain, but many stepped forward with open arms and hearts. We met for coffee, shared long walks through the city's parks, and spent evenings talking late into the night. Their presence reminded me that I was not alone, that I had a network of support willing to listen and stand by me. Seeking additional support, I joined a local group for people recovering from infidelity. At first, I was hesitant, unsure if I belonged among strangers who shared such intimate pain. But the group became a sanctuary, a space where stories were told without judgment and where healing was a collective journey. Listening to others' experiences helped me feel less isolated, and sharing my own story brought a sense of relief and connection I hadn't realized I needed. Through these meetings, I learned valuable tools for coping and self-care, mindfulness exercises, journaling prompts, and strategies for rebuilding trust in myself and others. The group fostered a sense of solidarity, reminding me that while my path was uniquely mine, I was part of a larger community of resilience and hope. Gradually, my confidence began to return. I started exploring new hobbies, painting, yoga, and even a cooking class that reignited my love for experimenting with flavors. These activities filled my days with joy and discovery, helping me reconnect with parts of myself that had been overshadowed by grief and betrayal. Each new experience was a step toward reclaiming my identity beyond the role of the betrayed wife. Living alone also gave me space to reflect deeply on my needs and boundaries. I learned to listen to my intuition without fear, to say no when something didn't feel right, and to prioritize my well-being without guilt. This process was both liberating and challenging, as it required confronting long-held patterns of self-sacrifice and people-pleasing. In this new chapter, I found strength in solitude, but I also remained open to the possibilities of connection and love, not out of necessity, but from a place of genuine readiness. I understood that healing was not linear and that setbacks were part of the process. But with each day, I felt more grounded, more aligned with the person I wanted to become. Looking back, I realized that leaving the marriage was not just an ending but a beginning, a chance to rebuild on my own terms. The pain of betrayal had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, but it also opened the door to growth and self-discovery. I was learning to embrace vulnerability as a source of strength, not weakness. As the seasons changed outside my apartment window, so too did I. The small garden of herbs on my balcony flourished, a living metaphor for the renewal taking place within me. I nurtured myself with kindness and patience, understanding that healing required time and gentle care. Though the scars of the past remained, they no longer defined me. Instead, they became part of my story, a testament to the resilience and courage that carried me through. I was no longer just the woman who had been betrayed, I was a survivor, a creator, and a woman reclaiming her life with grace and determination. With this renewed sense of self, I began to envision a future filled with possibility. The pain had been profound, but so was the strength I found in its aftermath. I was ready to step forward, embracing the unknown with hope and confidence, knowing that I was worthy of love, respect, and happiness on my own terms. It was during one of those ordinary workdays that Mark re-entered my life, a colleague from years ago, someone I hadn't thought much about until our paths crossed again at a local design conference. Mark was the kind of person whose presence felt effortless, a quiet warmth beneath his thoughtful eyes. We reconnected easily, sharing memories of projects and clients, but something deeper began to stir beneath the surface of our renewed friendship. Mark's kindness was steady and unassuming. He never rushed me or pressed for more than I was willing to share, offering support without expectation. In a time when I was learning to trust again, his patience was a balm. We started meeting for coffee after work, sometimes just to talk, other times to collaborate on creative ideas. Those moments felt light and genuine, a refreshing contrast to the heaviness that had weighed on me for so long. Together, we explored new hobbies that neither of us had tried before, weekend hikes in the nearby hills, painting classes at a community center, even a cooking workshop where laughter often spilled over the clatter of pots and pans. These shared experiences reminded me of life's possibilities beyond pain and betrayal. With Mark, I rediscovered the joy of simple pleasures and the comfort of companionship without pressure. Our friendship unfolded gradually, built on mutual respect and honesty. Mark never tried to fill the void left by my past relationship. Instead, he offered a steady presence that allowed me to heal at my own pace. It was in this space of gentle understanding that I began to open my heart again, not out of need but from a place of genuine readiness. Reflecting on these moments, I recognized how vital honesty and open communication had become to me. After the years of secrecy and deception, I craved transparency and trust in every connection I formed. Mark embodied these qualities, and our conversations often circled back to the importance of being seen and heard without judgment. Encouraged by this newfound clarity, I began to share my story more openly, not just with Mark, but with others in my life and even through writing. I started a blog, a space where I could process my experiences and offer support to others navigating similar pain. Writing became a therapeutic outlet, a way to turn my vulnerability into strength. The response was unexpectedly powerful. Readers reached out, sharing their own stories, expressing gratitude for the honesty and courage it took to speak openly about betrayal and healing. I realized that by sharing my journey, I was helping to create a community of understanding and resilience. The isolation I had once felt was replaced by connection and shared humanity. Through this process, I became an advocate for those grappling with the aftermath of infidelity. I spoke at local support groups, volunteered for organizations focused on relationship recovery, and offered mentorship to women seeking to rebuild their lives. Giving voice to my experience transformed my pain into purpose. As I continued to grow, I learned to celebrate the complexities of healing, the setbacks and triumphs, the moments of doubt and clarity. I embraced the imperfect nature of recovery, understanding that resilience was not about forgetting the past but about moving forward with grace and self-compassion. Mark remained a cherished part of this chapter, a reminder that genuine connection was possible even after profound loss. Our friendship, free from the shadows of betrayal, was a testament to the healing power of kindness and trust. Looking back, I see how far I have come, from the depths of heartbreak to the emergence of hope and renewal. The journey has been arduous, but it has also been rich with lessons about love, forgiveness, and the strength of the human spirit. Through sharing my story and embracing new relationships, I found not only healing but also a deeper understanding of myself. I am no longer defined by the pain I endured but by the courage I summoned to reclaim my life and my happiness. This chapter of my life continues to unfold, filled with possibility and grounded in the wisdom gained from my journey. I move forward with an open heart, ready to embrace the future with hope, resilience, and the knowledge that true connection is built on honesty and love. Looking back on the path I've walked, I feel a complex mix of sadness and gratitude swirling within me. The journey from betrayal to healing was far from easy, marked by moments of despair and doubt, yet also illuminated by resilience and hope. It's a chapter of my life that reshaped me in profound ways, revealing strengths I hadn't known I possessed and teaching me lessons about love, trust, and self-worth that continue to guide me every day. The affair shattered the foundation of my marriage and left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself and the man I had trusted. Yet, in that shattering, a new clarity emerged. I came to understand that pain, while deeply wrenching, can also be a catalyst for growth. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, to examine the parts of my life I'd taken for granted, and to reclaim my voice in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I learned that self-respect is not negotiable, that it is the bedrock upon which all healthy relationships must be built. The decision to leave was not just about ending a marriage but about choosing myself, my dignity, and my future. It was an act of courage born from a desire to live authentically and with integrity. In rebuilding my life, I discovered the power of connection, not just in romantic relationships but in friendships, community, and shared stories. The kindness of friends, the support of counselors, and the solidarity found in support groups became lifelines, reminding me that I am not alone and that healing is a collective journey as much as it is a personal one. Through my blog and speaking engagements, I found a way to transform my pain into purpose, helping others navigate their own paths through betrayal and recovery. Sharing my story has been both humbling and empowering, reinforcing the belief that vulnerability can be a source of strength and that our experiences, no matter how painful, can foster empathy and understanding. Meeting Mark and reconnecting with genuine friendship and kindness reinforced the importance of honesty and openness in relationships. His patient support showed me that trust can be rebuilt, that new beginnings are possible, and that love, when grounded in truth, can be healing rather than hurtful. As I look forward, I carry with me the lessons of the past but do not let them define me. I embrace a future shaped by resilience, self-awareness, and the willingness to trust again, not blindly, but with a heart that has learned to guard itself while remaining open to connection. I encourage anyone facing betrayal to trust their instincts and seek support. The journey through pain is daunting, but with courage and community, it is possible to find light beyond the darkness. Healing is not linear, and setbacks are part of growth, but every step forward is a testament to strength and hope. My story is one of transformation, from heartbreak to healing, from loss to renewal. It is a reminder that while we cannot control the actions of others, we have the power to choose how we respond, to reclaim our lives, and to create futures filled with dignity, love, and authenticity. In embracing this truth, I have found peace and purpose. And I continue to walk forward, not just as a survivor of betrayal but as a woman who has reclaimed her story and her strength, ready to face whatever comes next with courage and grace. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.